Hello, everybody. Welcome into GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, January 21st. We have a huge show for you, as always. Of course, the big news of the day coming in yesterday, Ohio State, the new national champion for college football. The Big Ten has the crown yet again. Ohio State wins their 9th national title. We'll talk all about that. Then we'll get into Ben Johnson being named the next head coach of the Chicago Bears, as well as other coaching news, NFL power rankings as we head into the NFL championship games, and some MLB updates as far as free agency goes, a couple big names off the board. But before we get into any of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, January 21st. But like I was saying, we are going to get into our first topic of the day, as Ohio State has won their 9th national title and their first one since 2014. Of course, 2014, just like this year, was the start of a brand new playoff format. Now, of course, that's just coincidence over there, but it's a fun little tidbit. They win the first ever 4-team national title and the first ever 12-team national title. Lots of fun to get out of there, but in their playoff run, Ohio State was a juggernaut. This was the team they were supposed to be all season long, and it seems like that loss to Michigan really kicked them into high gear. Breaking down this game against Notre Dame, it looked like it was going to be a tough one at first. Riley Leonard and Notre Dame led an 18-play, 75-yard drive that took 9 minutes and 45 seconds off of the clock in the first quarter, basically eating up all of that first quarter before Ohio State even touched the ball. Riley Leonard was getting whatever he wanted on the ground. Lots of tough running on the inside, 8 carries on that first drive alone, leading them down the field in what was the longest drive in the history of the BCS National Championship game history. That was a massive drive for them to get a little bit of momentum, and I thought maybe they'd be able to keep it up. But after that, it was all Ohio State until the third quarter. The entirety of the second quarter and the beginning of the third was Ohio State dominating. Notre Dame was held to about 10 yards total in that second quarter. After that first drive, they were completely shut down. Ohio State goes for 31 unanswered points, 3 touchdowns by running back Quinshon Judkins, 1 through the air, 2 on the ground, as well as a 70-yard run in that span of 5 straight drives where they scored at least a field goal. That 70-yard run was the last big play that Ohio State had until the end of the game, and that's where things got interesting. But a couple numbers from that dominant first half from Ohio State. Again, holding Notre Dame, a team that had been very consistent offensively, to just about nothing in an entire quarter is incredible, really. They enter halftime 21 with 21 points in the bag at that point, up 21-7, and it seems like that game is just going to be a blowout. It really does. And I wouldn't blame you for turning it off after they scored another one of their touchdowns down the stretch there. But instead, Notre Dame finds a way back. Will Howard had an amazing game in this one. He ended the first half 11 for 12, only 1 incompletion. He started 11 for 11. That was a masterclass by him in that game. He was able to use his legs a good amount, and Will Howard isn't the most mobile of quarterbacks, but as we saw in that game, and as we've really seen all season, he has the ability to run as an option and pull it if you need him to. It's never going to be his number one option. He's not a runner, as the case with Riley Leonard is, but he is a guy who's got that extra little bit of burst and athleticism, picked up a couple key first downs down the stretch for them to help put that game away. Ohio State up 24 points, and at that point, you can assume this game is just about over. We're in the third quarter at this point. Finally, a drive by Notre Dame. They hadn't been able to get anything done all game long. Notre Dame finally crawls their way back. They score a touchdown, get the 2-point conversion on a beautiful play, design where they're able to get some motion and dive into the end zone with their star running back Jeremiah Love there. They're only down 16. That is a 2-possession game at this point. Ohio State looks like it's driving yet again, and then they're able to force a fumble, something that the Notre Dame defense had been unable to do all game long, but something they'd thrived on all season long, is turning the other team over. We saw it strike in that Penn State game when they got key interceptions at the end of regulation to set up that game-winning field goal. This is where the big question happened with this game, right? They force that turnover. They're able to drive down the field, aided by some help, aided by some penalties. They get down there. And then on 4th and goal from the 9-yard line, down 16 at near the end of the third quarter, they decide to kick a field goal. Down by 16 points, instead of a 2-possession game, you could have made it a 1-possession game with a touchdown and an extra point. That field goal, all it does is make it a 13-point game. Still a 2-possession game there. It doesn't make any sense to me at all, and I've yet to see anything out there that explains why Marcus Freeman, who deserves some credit for getting his team back in it, decided not to go for it. Obviously, at the end of the day, it didn't matter. And maybe you can make the argument that if they make that kick, they get the ball back with, 7 seconds, they can try a Hail Mary or a lateral play to try and get that game-tying touchdown. Instead of losing by 10, they only lose by 7, and they save face there a little bit. But that felt like a losing mentality kind of move. When they, instead of going out of their way to try and win the game, be aggressive, which is something that Ohio State ended up doing down the stretch, they said, we're just going to take some points. We're going to make this look a little bit closer than it is. And that's not something that you can do. It's not an acceptable decision-making. It's not an acceptable decision to make, especially when you're entering the final quarter of the final game of the regular season. If this was a regular of the championship game, right? If this was a regular season game, right? They go out there, they make this decision. It's not a great one, but it's not going to end your season. But this one literally was your last chance out there. Why not give your guys a shot? Why not give Riley Leonard and that offense the shot that they had been trying to get to all game long? When they finally had a little bit of momentum, instead they put their kicker out there and they end up missing the kick. Now, Ohio State could have run it all the way back. They end up running out of bounds at the 30-yard line, but that field position didn't even end up mattering, right? Obviously, they get the ball back, they drive down the field to score, get another 2-point conversion, and cut it to 8. But at that point, you could have gone for it, and make it or not, this game feels a lot different, right? In the timeline where they make that 4th and 9 to score and potentially tie that game, they're either down 2 or it's a tie game at that point, and we're looking at this game much differently, right? Ohio State has to take this game a lot more seriously, and you have a lot more momentum on your side, and that's been a huge thing in college football all season long, especially in these playoffs. Instead, we live if you went in that timeline where you went for it and failed, at least you tried, right? At least I'm not sitting here 24 hours later and I'm talking about how they made one of the more cowardly decisions that I have ever seen in my life of watching football, right? That's not something that the legacy of this game is. This is a game that could have gone down, at least if they tried it, as a valiant comeback effort. Instead, I'm looking at it, and yes, they shaved a 24-point lead down to 8 at one point, and that's all well and good. But I'm looking at this and I'm saying, they didn't really try to come back. That's my takeaway from this game because of that decision. And obviously, it's not true. They tried to come back, and that decision just didn't make any sense. No analytics I've seen support that. Nothing makes any sense. It was just one of the more cowardly moves that I've ever seen watching football. But instead of trying to potentially make it a one-score game, they kick a field goal, and it doesn't even work. So Notre Dame, eventually, like I said, gets back to that 8-point lead. Ohio State is able to drive down, and 3rd and 11 with the game on the line is able to hit star freshman receiver for a 56-yard gain on 3rd and 11. A blitz was brought out there by Notre Dame, and I've seen a lot of people say that that wasn't a great call. I don't mind that call at all. I understand that's what they've been doing. That's what they've been successful at all year long. Obviously, you need to put a little bit of more coverage on a guy like Jeremiah Smith, but it's tough with the type of athletes that Ohio State has on the outside. It's not only Jeremiah Smith you have to worry about, it's Emeka Egbuka. It's guys that have stepped up huge throughout the rest of the game for them. Tight ends, other wide receivers up and down that roster. This is a team that has a bajillion different pass catchers, running backs as well, that have hurt them all game long. Instead, they go to the freshman phenom Jeremiah Smith for a 56-yard dime by Will Howard under pressure. Again, I don't mind the call. I really don't. It's what they've been great at, and if you can get pressure on a guy like Will Howard fast enough, it's either going to force an errant throw, take a sack, and you have a chance there to go down the field and tie the game. Instead, they kick that field goal. Notre Dame gets the ball back with like 5 seconds left. Game is over at that point. This was a good game. This was a good college football game, and I think it showed that both of these teams deserve to be there. It wasn't like either of these teams got blown out despite how it ended up looking at the first half of that game. Notre Dame figured something out. They were able to play Ohio State. It wasn't like Ohio State was sleepwalking through that second half. They were trying to score. A lot of their success came on those turnover plays that they were able to force. Notre Dame was, and Jaden Greathouse making a couple of really great catches, some great throws by Riley Leonard to get this game to be very close. Instead, the legacy of this game is that cowardly decision to not go for it on 4th and goal from the 9-yard line, and that's where we're at. Ohio State wins their 9th national title in the program's history. First since 2014, they cap off one of the most dominant runs in the history of college football to get to win the college football playoffs, going through the number 1 team in the country, a top 10 team in the country, and another top 5 team in the country. 2 more, actually, beating 3 top 5 teams in the country on their way to a national championship banner. But let me know what you thought of this game, of this season. I thought it was a really good game. Ohio State proved that they were the best team in college football. I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we turn our attention to the NFL. The big story out of the NFL today is the Bears signing a new head coach. Ben Johnson, the former offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions, has finally picked a spot to go. We'll talk about that and much more coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that waiting to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, January 21st. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over the national championship game in college football. The Ohio State Buckeyes take home their 9th national title in the program's history, the first since 2014. In this segment, we turn our attention over to the NFL. Ben Johnson has been named the Bears' new head coach, finally leaving the offensive coordinator position for the Detroit Lions after serving 3 very successful years over there. He was the top choice out there, and he chooses the Bears. We'll talk about what that means for him, what that means for the Bears, and if this was a good decision coming up in just a second. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, January 21st. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the big story surrounding the NFL, which of course at this time of year is the coaching carousel. And the big news is the Chicago Bears hiring Ben Johnson, the former offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions. Now, he has been with Detroit for 3 years, and he was really the belle of the ball in this year's coaching carousel. He was the guy that everyone was trying to vie for, everyone was trying to get. He's been that kind of candidate for the last couple of years. He was a finalist in Washington last season. He could have taken that job. He could have taken basically any job that he wanted in this year's coaching cycle. He decides to join the Chicago Bears, and I think for my money, that was the only right decision for him. This year's coaching cycle, there aren't a lot of great options out there. Chicago Bears, by far, are the only one that I think really are that positive. You can make an argument for the Dallas Cowboys, but that comes with its own set of certain circumstances. None of the other ones really sit there and scream, this is a great place to go, especially for a guy like Ben Johnson, who had been so particular with his choices of where he wanted to go and be a head coach, choosing to go back to the Lions multiple times over the last couple years instead of taking a head coaching job. He takes the only one that makes any sense. And the reason that this one makes a lot of sense is because they have basically everything in place. They have a quarterback who just came off of being the first overall pick in the 2024 NFL draft in Caleb Williams, a guy that undeniably flashed a lot of really good talent. Now, it didn't always work out. He held the ball too long, tried and make too many big plays, was a little bit inaccurate, got sacked almost as many times as anybody else in the history of the NFL. He was in the top 5 in the history of the NFL. Now, a lot of that was on the offensive line, but a lot of that was on him as well. His inability to read the field, find the open guy. He just wasn't the greatest quarterback last season. They need to go and fix a couple things. This hire, I think, is a home run hire for both sides here. Caleb Williams gets to work with an offensive genius like Ben Johnson, which is what I've been pushing for. There's been a lot of reports of the Bears being interested in guys like Mike McCarthy. And while he's a good offensive guy, he's not the guy that's going to be able to design these creative plays for Caleb Williams to be the most successful. He's not the guy that the Bears needed to develop their quarterback that they hope can be the franchise guy for 15, 20 years in a Chicago Bears uniform. This is also a Chicago Bears team that currently has a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. Some of the most cap space in the entire NFL. The big issue with them, of course, is the offensive line. They're losing 3 of their 5 starters, but that shouldn't be an issue. They're going to be able to grab one of the better offensive tackles in the draft. They'll be able to spend a lot of money on that position in the offseason. And it's not just that either. The defense was a top 10 unit in all of the NFL last season. If you're able to pair that, again, coaching is going to be very important. They're going to need to go out and get the right coaches. They're going to need to go out and get the guys that can develop these players, that can develop Caleb Williams. Go get a good quarterback coach. Go get a good defensive coordinator to put that defense together to where it can be like it was in the first half of the season, one of the best units in football, as opposed to the back half when they fired their coaches, things got into a mess, they got into fights, and the defense just kind of, for lack of a better term, slack off a little bit, right? They weren't playing 100%, maybe they were injured, the scheme wasn't the same. For whatever reason, it wasn't working. So they need to get a good defensive coordinator that can get the most out of the guys that have proven they can be a very, very successful unit. They've got the wide receivers, they've got the weapons, they've got the tight ends. They just need the offensive line, and they need Caleb Williams to continue to develop. And I think putting a guy like Ben Johnson there is going to really help them get the most out of Caleb Williams. That's what I was worried about with the Chicago Bears offseason. They needed to get that coaching hire right. And I was worried they were going to go get a retread. I was worried they were going to go hire someone that could build a culture, maybe bring in a defensive guy that wasn't going to work with Caleb Williams, because their entire focus of this franchise should be right now Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams, Caleb Williams, Caleb Williams. That's the only thing they should be focusing on right now. How can we get that Heisman winner, number 1 overall pick, guy that people were calling a generational talent out of the draft, out of this guy that we now have? That's what they need to focus on, and that's going to be the thing that determines whether or not his tenure is successful. I think it's going to work. I don't think it's going to work like that. I don't think it's going to work immediately. This is something that they're going to need patience. He's going to need to install his offense. He's going to need to get the right pieces in there to make that offense go. He came into a situation in Detroit where they had a lot of pieces ready to go. One of the best offensive lines in the league. Position groups offensively that are some of the best. Again, they're able to draft a guy like Sam Laporta last season. They get Jahmyr Gibbs. They got David Montgomery from the Bears, who were not really able to unlock everything out of him because they didn't have the offensive line. Wide receivers like Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jared Goff that just needed the right system around him to be successful. Right? The Lions had a lot of those pieces that you want as an offensive coach to be successful. Now getting a guy like Caleb Williams to work with Ben Johnson, they've still got some of those pieces. The weapons, I think, are comparable. They need to get a better running back than DeAndre Swift. The Lions themselves moved off of him in Ben Johnson's system, so I don't expect him to be the lead back there for a long period of time, or really any longer than his contract is. I don't even know if he'll start this season despite being there. There's going to be a lot of changes in that building, and I'm excited to see what they build. Just remember, you can't expect the Bears to turn what was maybe the worst offensive line in all of the NFL into a great one in one offseason. It's going to take time, and the Bears higher ups, the guys in the front office, need to understand that this is still a rebuild team. This is a team that is really close to being successful. They just didn't finish building that foundation. Once they get that, I think the Bears will be better, and I think they could take off like the Lions did under Dan Campbell when Ben Johnson was over there. Because like I said, they've got a lot of the pieces already in place. This is a home run hire for the Bears. This is a home run hire for Ben Johnson, and I think it's going to be a match made in heaven for him, Caleb Williams, and everything that Bears team is trying to do. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know what you think of this hire. Was it a great one? Did Ben Johnson make the right decision? Because he got to choose basically wherever he wanted to go. I think it was. Let me hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we turn our attention to the NFL power rankings. 4 teams left. We're going to rank them 1 through 4, talk about why they're there and why each team has a chance to win the Super Bowl. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube. Absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, January 21st. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over the Bears hiring Ben Johnson, the first big domino to fall in this year's coaching cycle. The big one that everyone was waiting on. Now every other team reacts and makes their decisions based off of that. In this segment, we continue our coverage of the NFL with some NFL power rankings. Just 4 teams remain in the hunt for the Lombardi Trophy. We're going to rank them 1 through 4, talk about why they have a chance, if they have a chance, and everything else involved in that. But before we do that, remember, If you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, January 21st. But like I was saying, we are going to get into our third topic of the day, the NFL Power Rankings. The conference championship games are here. Just 4 teams remain in the hunt for the Lombardi Trophy. The Washington Commanders, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Buffalo Bills. We will rank them 1 through 4. Which team has the best chance to get that, to raise that trophy? At number 4 here, I think pretty simply, and I don't think many people will argue with me, is the Washington Commanders. They have been incredibly impressive, and by putting them at 4, I am by no means saying that they don't deserve to be here. I am in no way saying that they don't have a chance of winning the Super Bowl. I'm just saying they have the hardest path by far, and the reason is because their defense just isn't up to snuff. We've talked a lot about Jaden Daniels and how amazing he's been, and there's no doubt about it. You can't look at what he's done all playoffs long, all season long, and say he hasn't been amazing. I'm on record here saying he's the 5th best quarterback in the NFL, but that's only good to make him the 3rd best quarterback in these rankings, right? You still have to contend with guys like Patrick Mahomes, guys like Josh Allen that are still in a tier above him. But he's been amazing, and that Commanders team has beaten every single expectation you could have possibly put at them in the beginning of the season. This is the most successful season they have had since 1991, where they won 12 games and a Super Bowl. This is their best season in the 21st century, and it's not even close. It's very impressive what this team has done, but this is not their year. This is not the year where they are built to do it. They're going to have to run the gauntlet with these next couple teams. The Philadelphia Eagles, obviously a division rival, gives them a chance because division games always chaotic. But the Eagles have, in my opinion, the best defense in the NFL. If they run into the Chiefs, they're going to go into maybe the 2nd best defense in the NFL. The Bills, they're going to have to contend with another solid defense, one that just shut down Lamar Jackson and the Ravens to the best that just about anybody could shut down Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. And they have Josh Allen on their team, who's playing like a superhero right now. So that is just a really, really tough road for them to deal with, and because of that, they're here at number 4 on the list. It's nothing against them. They are a great team, but I just think they are the team that is least likely to win the Super Bowl when it comes to this group of 4. At number 3, I have the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles are slightly above the Commanders because that defense is amazing, but when you take a look at all these teams, you take a step back, the offense is a bit concerning. They have Saquon Barkley, who has kept that team afloat, but you need to be able to throw the ball. And I know there's been discussions about Josh Allen having a similar stat line. Both of these teams finished, both Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts finished with 127 and 128 yards respectively. But this is not a trend that leads to winning football, right? The Eagles have a great defense. Again, probably the best defense in the NFL. They probably have the best running back in the NFL, and that is keeping them in games. But they let the Rams come all the way back in a snow game from when it seemed like they were done. The Rams got all the way down to about 20 yards out from completing a massive comeback last week, and that's because the offense, when it comes to crunch time, if they zero in on Saquon Barkley, you're not getting those contributions from your star wide receivers, your A.J. Browns, your Devonta Smiths, that you need these guys to be. Jalen Hurts has not been effective in getting them the ball, and he has not been accurate when targeting them. He has given up hospital balls to Devonta Smith, letting him take these massive hits. A.J. Brown didn't have his greatest game. He dropped a would-have-been touchdown, but he and Jalen Hurts are having their own kind of issues. They're not really, reports from the locker room saying they haven't really been that close like they were when they originally joined this team, right? This is a team that has some internal turmoil, but that defense is really good. And I'm just not convinced that they're the team that's going to win a Super Bowl this year. I do think they have the 3rd best chance, but those 2 AFC teams are a completely different animal. And because of that, they're here at number 3. At number 2, I'm putting the Buffalo Bills. And I know, the Buffalo Bills are playing really good football right now. They just took down the Baltimore Ravens, who were my pick at the beginning of these playoffs to win the Super Bowl. Josh Allen is playing basically perfect football right now, even if his stats don't show it. You talk about being able to not turn the ball over, still being pretty accurate. And still, the passing numbers are a little bit concerning, especially when they play the style of football that they do. But him being able to get 2 touchdowns on the ground, being able to be physical, and more importantly, being able to keep the ball out of their opponent's hands has been incredibly important. That defense stepped up, forced 3 turnovers in that game to keep them in it, and that defense has been playing amazing as well. At the end of the day, I just trust Josh Allen a little bit more than I trust Jalen Hurts, and that's nothing on Jalen Hurts. He's still a really good quarterback. Again, I'm not trying to take people down by putting this list up, but I do think that the Bills have a slightly better chance, and I think Josh Allen is someone that can turn it on a little faster and a little more consistently than Jalen Hurts can. And because of that, despite these two teams being, in my opinion, very similar, the Eagles being a little bit worse offensively and being a little better defensively than the Bills, but I think at the end of the day, I'm trusting in Josh Allen to get them a better chance at the Super Bowl than the Eagles this season. But still, a very tough list at 2 and 3. And at number 1, of course, that leaves the one, the only, the Kansas City Chiefs. And the reason they're at number 1 is because it just feels inevitable, right? I'm not saying that this Kansas City Chiefs team isn't playing great, because they are. Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs are playing really good football right now. There's a reason that people are mad. They are going for the first three-peat in the history of the Super Bowl era, and that's not an easy accomplishment to do. What they've been able to do with their consistency, with their ability to win close games, it's a skill. It's not luck. And sure, some bad calls were made in that game, but they were going to win that game regardless. The Houston Texans, for how they played in that game, never really had a shot to win that football game, to advance past the Kansas City Chiefs and play in the AFC Championship game. They just were not going to do it. The Chiefs were always going to win that game, especially the way that offense was going. And that Chiefs team isn't perfect. But like I said, they have probably the second best defense in football right now. And what Patrick Mahomes has been able to do, how the Chiefs have been able to control the ball offensively, how that defense has been able to tee off on quarterbacks and come up with huge stops when they need to stop the run game, which is very important in this year's playoffs. Especially, we look at teams that have been very, very focused on running backs, not a lot of possessions, but the Chiefs, they find a way to score on a lot of their possessions when a lot of these other teams that are near the top of this list have been a little bit less successful. The Eagles, for instance, they struggle in the kicking game. Jake Elliott is not having his best season. The Bills, they just sometimes aren't able to get that offense going. But the Chiefs, they have been consistently consistent, which is something that's hard to say about a lot of other teams. And because of that, I think they have the best chance to win the Super Bowl, and I don't think it's very close. But let me know what you think of my list. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Commanders at 4, Eagles at 3, Bills at 2, Chiefs at 1. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we do a little ride around the coaching carousel, some news surrounding what might get hired or some coordinators that have been hired in the NFL coaching carousel. We'll be right back with that and much more coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found. For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, January 21st. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over the power rankings for the top 4 teams left in the NFL: the Commanders, the Eagles, the Bills, and the Chiefs. In this segment, we finish up our NFL talk with a little bit of coaching updates. There have been 3 major updates surrounding the world of coaching as we headed into our show today. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those 2 things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, January 21st. But like I was saying, we are going to get into our 4th segment of the day, the NFL coaching updates. The carousel continues to turn, and it's not just head coaches that we have to keep our eye on, but a couple of major coordinators that have either been recently fired or recently hired. A couple of big names have found new homes in this year's coaching cycle. The Colts have named a new defensive coordinator, Lou Anarumo. Lou Anarumo from the Cincinnati Bengals was fired this offseason after the Bengals had one of the worst defenses in the NFL this year. They started to turn it around down the stretch and play better, but they were a team that was dealing with a lot of different injuries to key players. They had guys coming in and out of the lineup, and overall the skill positions that they had on that defensive unit just were not enough for a team like the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't blame Lou Anarumo for this. Anarumo is a guy that has coached this defensive unit throughout basically all of the Joe Burrow era. He's been incredibly successful and has been a huge part of why the Bengals made their Super Bowl run. When he was the defensive coordinator, he was able to get them to the Super Bowl. He got a lot of different head coaching considerations a couple of years ago. Now he is let go, and the Colts make a huge swing, bring him in as the defensive coordinator. So he moves from the Bengals to the Colts, a Colts defense that has been pretty solid, but hasn't really been able to take that next step. Ever since losing Matt Eberflus as their defensive coordinator, he went to take that Bears head coaching job. They just have not quite been able to do it. Shane Steichen hits a home run here. I think this is a massive hire, and I think this absolutely elevates that Colts team, a Colts team that has been so close to making the playoffs the last couple seasons. Obviously, this year was a little bit different than last year where they were just a play away, and a lot of it does rely on developing a guy like Anthony Richardson, right? They need to be able to develop him on the offensive end, but the defense is a unit that's been sitting around 15-ish in the league, kind of middling, a very good unit at forcing turnovers, and it's one that had a really bad game against the Giants. I think bringing in a guy like Lou Anarumo is going to completely overhaul the way that this defense works, and I think that's something that they desperately needed. I love this hire. I think that's something that could absolutely add a win or two to this Indianapolis Colts squad, and I think that's one of the best coordinator hires of the offseason so far. Another coordinator that was hired just a couple hours before we went live here today, Josh McDaniels, has been brought back to New England. Josh McDaniels is now the new offensive coordinator for the New England Patriots, serving this time under Mike Vrabel. Now, Josh McDaniels, of course, was the longtime offensive coordinator for Bill Belichick in that Patriot system. He's been a head coach twice, and twice it didn't really work out with the Broncos and with the Raiders. Both of them did not really go well. He returns after a year off to the New England Patriots, and this is a really interesting one. My initial reaction to this hire was a little bit of skepticism, because we have not seen Josh McDaniels be successful when he's not under the wing of Bill Belichick. Now, obviously, Bill Belichick did not run offenses, and we've only seen him be head coach when he's not under the wing of Bill Belichick. This is going to be a really interesting season for how we view a guy like Josh McDaniels. My view of him right now is that I don't know if he's going to be successful. I'm a little skeptic. I'm a little bit of a skeptic about this, right? He's a guy that, again, has not seen a lot of success when you don't have that defense that Bill Belichick was able to build. And as much as I like Mike Vrabel, he's not that same kind of defensive mind. He's not that guy that's going to build these elite defenses that Bill Belichick was able to build in his time with the Patriots. Drake May is not the same quarterback as Tom Brady. That offense is going to have to look a little bit different. It's going to have a little bit more motion. I'm curious how it's going to go. I'm a little bit optimistic for Drake May in this because he's been so successful as an offensive coordinator. There's probably not a lot of reason to doubt his track record, but he's never been able to do it without the big guy, without Bill Belichick as his head coach. And I'm really curious how it's going to go in his reunion with New England under Mike Vrabel. I think it'll work, but I'm not too sure about it. I've been going back and forth over it, but we will see. And the final big piece of news has to do with head coaches. The Jets have brought Aaron Glennon, the defensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. We just talked about Ben Johnson, the former offensive coordinator, I should say, of the Detroit Lions being hired to the Bears earlier on in this show. Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator right now, is being interviewed, his second interview with the New York Jets. This is an in-person interview. He is scheduled to have an in-person interview with the Saints later on this week, but the Jets do not want him to leave that building. All reports are saying that if it goes to the Jets' plan, if the interview goes well, if all of his questions get answered, Aaron Glenn will be the new head coach of the New York Jets. Overall, I like that hire. I'm not sure how much I'd like it for Aaron Glenn. That's not the greatest spot to be moved into unless the front office is aware of that, they're going to need to give him time, because this is a team that is pretty much doomed to fail if and when Aaron Rodgers ends up leaving. I don't know if this front office is making it a mandatory thing to want Aaron Rodgers to come back, or if they want a coach that doesn't want Aaron Rodgers to come back. But this is a very interesting proposal. He played for the Jets. He started his coaching career for the Jets. Aaron Glenn, I think, is a really good hire for the Jets if they're able to get him and they're able to be patient with him. And that's the key thing. If they can promise him that they'll be patient, they're not going to make any snap decisions, they're not going to fire him after a couple of bad seasons, then I think it's a good spot. But it's not going to be an easy rebuild. The Jets don't have a lot of cap space. They don't have they don't have a great draft pick record. And with Aaron Rodgers in that building, I'm not sure how it's going to go. But we will see. That's the head coaching news right now. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we turn our attention to the MLB. The MLB has two major free agents signed over the weekend and over the last couple of days. We're going to talk a little bit about who got signed, where they got signed, and whether or not that was a good deal for those players. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, January 21st. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over some updates from around the coaching carousel as we get closer and closer to more head coaches being hired and those staffs being filled out. In this segment, we turn our attention to the MLB. Lots of news coming out of there. Some high-profile free agents have found a new landing spot. We're going to talk about those in just a second. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, January 21st. But like I was saying, we're going to finish off our show here today going into the MLB just a little bit. The MLB has had a long free agency period, and we're dwindling down to a small number of key free agents remaining, but two of them have gone off the board recently over the weekend or yesterday. Starting off with a star closer. The former Padres all-star closer, Tanner Scott, finds a new home with the Los Angeles Dodgers, joining an already stacked bullpen and a team that just continues to add more and more talent. The most talented team in the MLB, currently expected to have the best record in baseball this season. 103 wins is what they're projected. The next closest team is at 91 with the Yankees. That is not very close. This is a team that has absolutely had a home run of an offseason, getting guys like Roki Sasaki on a cheap deal, now adding a star closer in Tanner Scott, who the Padres traded three prime prospects to get into their building for a postseason run, just half a season of control for Tanner Scott, and he walks out of that building and goes just 2 hours north to the city of Los Angeles to leave the Padres and join the Los Angeles Dodgers. That is a tough blow for the Padres. Tanner Scott, I love that decision for him, right? If you're a player and you're joining a team and you have a choice, the Dodgers want to pay you a good amount of money. Why not go there? He gets $72 million over 4 years. That's a pretty good deal for a guy like him. He is an elite closer. He adds back into that bullpen that already has a lot of big names. Not sure what role he's going to play. If he's going to be the primary closer for them, he probably will slip into that role, although they have a lot of guys back there that have experience closing games as well, so it's not a guaranteed spot for him. He's just going to be a part of a stacked team, a stacked bullpen, and a team that is expected to win the World Series this year. So as a player, that's a great decision. As an organization, it never hurts to have more quality arms in your bullpen, right? This is a Dodgers team that, like I said, just continues to add talent. If you can add talent, you add talent wherever you can. So the Dodgers are having an amazing offseason yet again. They've had to let go of a couple guys, but overall, this offseason for the Dodgers has been elite. Once again, obviously you're not comparing it to last season where you get one of the biggest fish in the history of the MLB in Shohei Ohtani to sign a $700 million contract, but you do get a lot of different guys over that can help continue to build this team's legacy and build this team's dynasty run. And the final piece of news, the Blue Jays signed probably the best hitter out there, at least pure power hitter, in Anthony Santander. The Blue Jays have been in on just about everybody this offseason. This is their first big cash-in of the year. They go get Anthony Santander, who hit a career-high 44 home runs for the AL East rival Bird team, the Orioles, last season. He is a guy with a lot of power. He can play solid defense over there, a DH/right fielder. He gets 5 years, $92.5 million to add some pop to that lineup that desperately needs it. This is a Blue Jays outfield that is one of the best defender outfields in all of baseball, but they don't have that power behind it. He's going to come in, play a little bit of DH, sit in the middle of the lineup, surrounded by guys like Bo Bichette and Vlad Guerrero Jr., who had a resurgent year, especially down the stretch last year. Pairing those guys together is just a huge win for the Blue Jays. They've been struggling to get those key free agents in there, and the Blue Jays still aren't a team that I think are an Anthony Santander away from being competitors, but they are a team that was really hot at the end of the season, and if they continue to add some really good pieces like that, maybe get a solid pitcher, if they can get a pitcher that's left on the market, then that's one that I think would really go well as they continue to try and build a competitor up in Toronto. Like I said, they've been in on just about everybody, and they still are in on a couple more bats. Guys like Alex Bregman still available, still looking to trade potentially for a guy like Nolan Arenado over in St. Louis. I don't see that one really happening, but getting a guy like Alex Bregman could really help continue to add to that lineup that they've started to beef up a little bit over the offseason. I'd like to get an arm or two over there in Toronto, but overall, a pretty good signing for them. I'm not sure if that Santander power surge is going to be super sustainable, but he did play in one of the bigger ballparks in the MLB at Camden Yards. So if he can hit 40 home runs over there, he has the ability to hit 40 home runs for the Blue Jays, but we will see. And thank you everybody so much for tuning into today's episode of GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I've been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. We will be back tomorrow breaking down all of the biggest news in sports. The MLB has announced their Hall of Fame players. 3 players got in. We will talk about that tomorrow. We'll talk about a trade in the NBA and any other big news that comes through the pipeline here throughout the rest of the night. Y'all have a good one. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.